Hello, my name is Laura Jarvis and we are here at Rainbow Gardens, really close to our beautiful pollinator garden. And today I want to talk about bees. I don't think that we talk about bees as pollinators quite enough, especially considering how important they are to everything that we do and all of the animals around us. And I think probably the number one thing that I want you to know is it's easy to add additional plants into your garden areas to help our pollinators along. Did you know that 1 out of every 3 bites of food that we take has to be pollinated by bees? So 1/3 of our food, and that doesn't even talk about, you know, all of the different things that we use for livestock. So that is really pretty important to human beings. And it's so easy to add some extra plants into your yards, and you don't have to create a whole large habitat if you're wanting, you know, if you don't want to get that involved. But it's very easy for everybody to add a couple of plants that will help our bees out. So I want to talk today about some of our favorite plants that will help our bees. But first, before I get to talking about some of these beauties, is I want to give you some information about adding pollinator or bee areas to your gardens. So there's a few things that you want to think about if you're actually going to create a little more of a habitat for them. And I would think number one would be some water. They are nectar feeders and pollen feeders. So we want the plants that are good for nectar and good for pollen for the bees. So, and the interesting thing about bees, and I found this out from our wonderful societies, our Xerces societies and bee clubs, and they are really drawn to lavender and blue type colors. So as you see here, these are some of the colors that we've picked out. And then something else I learned from our entomologist, our county extension entomologist here, and she's quite an interesting lady. She is also a beekeeper. Her name is Molly Geck, and she said that a lot of our herbs are really, really good for nectar and for pollen for our bee friends. So some of the other things that you might consider, a lot of our native bees, especially the bumblebee types and maybe even mason bees, a lot of them live in the ground. So we like to have some areas in our yard that are maybe a little bit undisturbed or different types of rock. We've got a rock wall around our butterfly area here, and Robin and I noticed the other day we saw several different types of bees coming and going out of that little rock retaining area. So those types of areas are really, really good for different types of bumblebees and hover bees, sweat bees, mason bees. Then something else that I wanted to show you guys, we're seeing these more and more and more on the market, and these are little habitats for bees. So this is something else that we can do quite easily, and there's all kinds of different sizes of little areas in here for different types of bees. Of course, we all know the straw type things are good for mason bees, and honestly, I don't know all of the other different types of areas in here. I know I've got hover bees and sweat bees and all kinds of bees I don't even know in my yard, but this would give them a nice habitat. And In the off season, they will usually overwinter. They burrow down in the ground and they overwinter in those areas. So we want to keep a certain amount that's undisturbed, that we're not digging in or moving stuff around a lot, and that'll give them a place to hide. So the other thing that is super, super, super important is for us to not use insecticides and pesticides. Basically, there are normal insecticides that can break down somewhere around 2 weeks, but then there's also pesticides that don't break down for months and months and months. So if you're spraying an insecticide in an area and these little guys burrow in the ground, you've just killed your bees. The pollinators that feed on things, if we're spraying things in the air, chemicals in the air to kill mosquitoes or to kill other unwanted insects, then we're also killing our pollinators. You're also destroying the honeybees. One of the things that we're doing is just trying to raise awareness and help people understand more what they're doing in their yards. There are organic chemicals that are really good, and then there are also, believe it or not, there's a few organic chemicals that are poisonous to bees as well. So just because it says organic doesn't always make it really a good thing for us to use. So think about these pollinators. Spinosad is an organic, but it will kill bees. If a butterfly or a bee gets on it and touches anywhere that it sticks to its body, it will kill it or take it back to the nest and kill the young ones. So pyrethrins also would be another one that is a true organic, but it can be very deadly for a lot of our insects. So that is not something that I would choose to use in my yard. And something interesting that I want everybody to know is I started pollinator gardening, especially butterflies, about 14 years ago or so, maybe a little longer. I've just really gotten interested in bees in the last 3 or 4 years, and they are totally fascinating. But the thing is when I started doing the pollinator gardening, I stopped using chemicals. And we did have a little bit of a struggle at first in our yard with a lot of insect infestation. But as the next season or two went by, what started happening is we started getting a whole lot of beneficial insects in our yard. Just recently, I think Robin and I both, we had a pretty bad aphid infestation. That happens a lot on our milkweeds that we like for our butterflies. And we were just kind of waiting and waiting, and then pretty soon all of these ladybugs came in and they cleaned up our yards, totally cleaned it up. I couldn't even find an aphid in there. So just be patient with nature, and if you enable nature to do what it normally does, most of the time these beneficial insects are going to come in and take care of things, and you're not even going to spray. We use safer soap and alcohol if we have to. We use hydrogen peroxide for some of the funguses and stuff if we have to. But if we don't have to, we just let nature take its course. All of these things that I just said, the hydrogen peroxide and alcohol and safer soap, you know, the day after you spray it, it's fine for your pollinators and your insects. And you can always wash stuff off too. So those are the things that you want to think about if you're going to enhance the garden that you have, bringing in more pollinators. So next, let's talk about some of these beautiful plants. So these are plants that we know bees love, love, love. So like I said, a lot of the herbs, and I think my favorite has got to be the African blue basil. It smells wonderful. It's just an absolutely gorgeous plant, and there is a very, very, very wide range of pollinators that like this plant. All the way from the smallest of bees all the way to butterflies and some of our interesting nectar feeding wasps and stuff, like our tarantula killer that kills tarantulas, and the main diet of the adult wasp is nectar. And we'll show you a picture one. We had one this morning feeding away. We see them a lot on these. So basils, a lot of the other varieties of basil are still very good, just not quite as good. But Tulsi, yeah, this is a type of basil. This is also a really good one. And then, like we were saying, blues and lavenders, we really like some of the blue salvias, like the mystic spires. I think we've got an indigo spires over here, maybe a Henry Duelberg. Oh, here we go. Henry Duelberg right here. That one works super, super, super good. So think about those blue salvias. They're going to work really good for you. Another really interesting thing I've got for you is the black and blue salvia has very, very large blooms on it. And this is something else I learned from our guys in our bee societies, our friends. They have large blooms and the hummingbirds love them. I never understood. The bees always go to the very back of the bloom, and I would see tons of bees on there, but they don't go inside the flower where you would think they would get nectar from. They always go to the back of the flower. Well, the guys at the Bee Society said that they're chewing a little hole back at the back of that flower, and then they're getting their little tongue in there, and they're extracting the nectar out of the center. And I thought that was the most interesting thing. It kind of, you know, you get this, I wonder why, and they solved that issue for us. So here's some verbenas. Some of our native verbenas are really good. This is a tall vervain. It has very small little flowers on it, so it's really, really great for bees. And something that always draws tons of bees in my yard is oregano. And oregano will bloom every single summer, and it has lots of little blooms on it. And the bees will just flock to that. Mexican heather, I don't know if you all have noticed before, but here at Rainbow Gardens, you see tons of bees on this all the time. And then it has a cousin that's called bat-faced kufia, and the bees also like that one. So these are really great plants you can start with. I hope you will be a little bit more interested and aware of how important the bees are and how easy it is to add some of these plants into your garden. I hope you do some of the bee gardening soon, and we'll talk to you later. Thank you. Bye.